We've got our first proper glimpse at how Formula One cars are going to look like in 2026 under these brand new regulations, as teams ran their new designs this week for the first time in Barcelona. And over the 5 days, there's been quite a few surprises and many talking points as well. So over the 5 days in Barcelona, what did we learn from F1's secret shakedown? The first talking point is of course Williams, because they were the only team out of all of the 11 teams not to show up for this secret shakedown in Barcelona, and that's simply because their car was not ready for on-track action. They reportedly were behind schedule, the car was not ready to run in Barcelona, so they elected not to take part in the shakedown over the 5 days and opted to instead run a kind of virtual program instead. That naturally saw a lot of reports going around about what was the cause to this delay in Williams debuting their car. Most of the rumours seem to suggest that they'd failed their crash tests and they were struggling to pass those, and that their car was overweight by quite a margin. Well, Williams obviously has come out and since said that they have now passed the crash tests and it is not as overweight or over the limit of the weight limit as people are suggesting it is. And Williams felt that actually it was better for them to miss this Barcelona shakedown for them to maximise car performance, so that when they arrive in Bahrain, which they've confirmed they are going to be doing, they will take part in both of the 3-day tests in Bahrain. So missing this initial test has given them a little bit more time to get the car ready so that it can fly out to Bahrain and get some valuable running. Like I said, even though they were missing Barcelona, they ran a virtual program so they could work on the final little details and made sure they were still race sharp and ready for when they do arrive in Bahrain for testing. And who knows, maybe actually missing the shakedown maybe could be a blessing in disguise. They could turn up in Bahrain and actually still be right on the pace and actually have produced a car that is going to be competitive, but still it isn't a great look for, especially for a team as established as Williams is, and for a team that has focused so much on these regulations that they hope is going to see them return to the front of the grid, compete for not just podiums, they want to fight for wins and championships. So it isn't a great look for the team. It was embarrassing, but it's done and dusted. Hopefully they will turn up in Bahrain and things will be much smoother there. Another thing that we learned, that there were some positive signs from Isaac Hadjar's first test for Red Bull. The shakedown in Barcelona was his first chance to obviously sample Red Bull machinery for the first time, and overall over his time in the car I thought he performed pretty solidly actually. He got a good number of laps. The only setback was that crash at the end of day 2, which was quite a big crash in the end. He actually damaged quite a lot of the car, particularly the rear wing and the rear of the car, and it cost Red Bull a couple of days running. It meant that their program was delayed until the final day. So obviously that was not ideal, and a lot of people look at it as not just a setback for Hadjar, but of course for others it will also be alarm bells ringing. Here we go again, the second Red Bull driver. It looks as though initially they're looking quite comfortable, getting up to speed, and then they have a setback. But the good news is that he's actually got this out of the way. I think if it is kind of a positive, he's already found the limit. He's still learning, he's still trying to adapt to this new Red Bull car. He's obviously in the same boat as everybody else, get used to the new regulations, how the cars work under these new regs. But I thought from the get-go the speed was there. He looks as though he looks quite comfortable. He obviously impressed last season in his rookie year for Racing Bulls, which obviously they felt merited his chance for a promotion alongside Verstappen. And overall, in spite of the crash, I thought he did a pretty good job. It's definitely something that he can build on for Bahrain, where hopefully he can have a much smoother and more productive test ahead of the first race in Melbourne. On the flip side, perhaps this is a sign that we're actually going to see the Hadjar that I and maybe many people expected to see in his rookie season. Someone who is incredibly fast, but I thought he was going to be erratic and reckless, but that obviously did not happen. He managed to team the speed with a lot of maturity and performed way better than everybody expected. So perhaps we actually are going to see that side of Hadjar that we thought we'd see in 2025. But obviously time will tell, and we've got to give him his chance to get up to speed and see how he gets on in the first few races. But as for Red Bull, I think actually for a first test they'll be quite pleased. Obviously we're in their new powertrain, the Red Bull powertrain, which obviously they've developed over the last few years. They've got the facilities up and running, and I think they'll be very pleased with how it went. It obviously hasn't completely wowed everyone, but I think for a first test it went very smoothly. There were no real big dramas in terms of the reliability or anything like that. They managed to get a lot of laps in, and I think probably have understood a lot more about how their engine works and so on. So overall, I think very positive for Red Bull. Mercedes, without a doubt, come out of this test with the biggest smiles on their faces, because as expected, there were a lot of expectations coming into this test that they were going to be the early season favourites, and that seems to have materialised. The Mercedes W17 looks very, very quick, and most importantly, it looks reliable. They got a lot of laps in, over 500 over the 5 days, and both George Russell and Kimi Antonelli seem very happy with the car that they've got underneath them. Of course, it is early days, you can't read too much into the times, but you can obviously get a little bit of a flavour as to how the cars and the teams are performing. And very quickly, it was very easy to establish that Mercedes look the team to beat. They have a very, very strong car. Mercedes are expected to be contending for the World Championship once again, which obviously they were unable to do in the previous Grand Effect era. But now that these regulations are more heavily favoured on the engine front, we know that they stole a march on everyone under the previous engine regulation change in 2014 when F1 switched to V6 engines, and that began the Mercedes dominant era, where they went on to win 8 consecutive Constructors' Championships in a row. And even though it was only our first real chance to see each of the cars out on track, it was pretty obvious that Mercedes was the standout from the shakedown, for the reasons of they managed to rack up many laps, and more often than not they were heading the timesheets on each of the days that they ran. And even though McLaren and Ferrari went quicker on the final day, I think for many, Mercedes were the strongest team over these 5 days. And what's going to be interesting is once the teams begin to turn up the wick a little bit in Bahrain, if Mercedes still have this advantage, and whether it actually becomes even more clear that they're the team to beat, or maybe the picture changes and we see a McLaren, a Ferrari or another team actually look stronger or on par with what they've got so far. But without a doubt, my gut feeling is Mercedes have the best car, and they're my early season title favourites. Even though Mercedes look like they have the best car at the moment, the headlines were stolen by Aston Martin's first Adrian Newey designed car that finally, after initially being delayed, rolled out for the first time on the day 4 of the shakedown. And I cannot remember when a car has been so eagerly anticipated to make its debut. They obviously made us wait quite a bit longer than we were expecting to, but at the same time I'm not kind of too surprised why it was delayed until the 4th day. I think for Adrian, his way of working, his way of thinking is trying to maximise as much time on designing the car and making sure everything is in order and as perfect as it can be. And considering it's not just his first design of an Aston Martin car, you've got to also consider that this is the first time that Aston Martin is running a Honda engine as well, because of course Honda are going to be supplying their engines for the first time this season, and Honda obviously are in the same boat as everybody else in designing a brand new engine for these new engine regulations. So there would have been a bit of nervousness on their side as much as Aston Martin, that they were hoping that everything was going to run as smoothly as possible, there were not going to be too many hiccups, and they get some good understanding and mileage from the shakedown. And as soon as the car rolled out the garage, my God, what a sight it was. It was a real head turner. Everybody immediately was almost gobsmacked, jaw on the floor. What a concept that Newey has come up with. It looks seriously aggressive, very extreme. It looks as though he's gone right to the limit of what these rules allow. No doubt some of the other teams, once they saw the car for the first time, would have been thinking, we didn't think of that. There's definitely some very unique ideas that Newey has obviously come up with. Whether they're going to work, obviously time will tell. And it's obviously just really exciting to see the car in the flesh for the first time. And now obviously we're even more excited to see how it gets on. Initially, it wasn't a great start. The car broke down after just a few laps, so maybe an early sign of maybe some teething problems. But then again, on day 5, they had a much better day, managed to get a lot of laps in, over 60, I believe, and that would have given them a lot of valuable information as to how the car performs under certain conditions. And now they've got something to build on going to Bahrain. When we got the first pictures of the MR26 and we saw just how extreme it was, it very much reminded me of Newey's design at McLaren when he designed the MP4-18 for 2003, the car that famously obviously never raced. That car was really ahead of its time and really showed Newey's way of thinking, but in the end the car was so dangerous that in the end McLaren elected not to race it. So obviously for Newey's sake and Aston Martin's sake, it's great that this car is up and running and has at least got initial laps under its belt, and now they can move forward and see what this car can really do in Bahrain. My final point as to what we've learned from the Barcelona shakedown is that F1 cars are far more reliable than the teams were expecting. This was a big talking point coming into the shakedown because teams were very worried that we were going to see repeats of what we saw at the beginning of the V6 hybrid era in 2014, when teams were struggling to even get a few laps on the board. Such was the problems with reliability back then. Many of them were expecting that we were going to have a similar problem this year. And this was the main reason why they decided to make this a private test and shut out all of the media and all of the cameras. But in the end, what has happened is the complete opposite. We have seen so many laps completed by all of the teams, They have done up to more than 2 race distances, sometimes 2.5 race distances. Such has been the reliability over the 5 days. And it's been great to see. It really does show that F1 and the team should have had much more belief in these regulations. And we weren't just going to have cars breaking down left, right and centre as teams tried to get on top of early niggles and try and perfect the reliability of their cars. Of course, it hasn't been completely plain sailing for all other teams. Audi had a few problems with their new power units. Cadillac, in their first official test, obviously the newest team on the grid, they hit some problems, and so did many of the other teams. But overall, you have to say it was a very positive first test for these new engines and regulations, and really was a bit of a smack in the face for Formula One as to why they decided to make this a behind closed doors test. Like I said, they should have had more faith in these regulations. It was very bemusing and baffling that they were promoting this test, and yet journalists, media, photographers were all banned from attending the circuit. They had loads of security around the circuit, making sure that nobody was trying to get a look at the cars from certain vantage points. So yes, it was very weird, but even though we weren't able to get too much information, clearly we have been able to learn a lot more than we were expecting to, and now we're all looking forward to the 2 tests in Bahrain, where they will be live, we'll be able to watch them, and we can now get an even bigger and more clearer picture of how each of the teams are faring and who is looking in the best shape for the first race in Australia. Well, there you are guys, that is it for today's video. Just under 2 weeks until that first test in Bahrain. I cannot wait for it, I'm sure you can't too. If you are new around here, don't forget to like the video, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.